clicking of my thumbs. Something wicked this way comes.
I do believe in the paranormal, and I've had one or two strange happenings in my former apartment that I'm thankful to be away from. I feel it has always been a very unwelcoming, even hostile place to try and live peacefully. My most frightening experience was so bizarre, I'm still in amazement. Sleep paralysis. This dreadful experience is not the only creepy event there, but truly my most terrifying. Happening so quickly and violently, I get shivers to this day, even flashbacks. Now, in this apartment, I couldn't go to bed until the very disgruntled upstairs neighbors finally tired themselves out, and that could be whenever, so my sleeping pattern stank. I'm exhausted and irritated, so perhaps I was more vulnerable to something somewhat paranormal. This was something I'd never ever experienced, something so shocking, so petrifying. I'd never given much thought or attention to the subject of sleep paralysis, so boy was I in for a wild ride, no pun intended there, leaving me paralyzed with fear to this very day. So, I finally get to lay down to some quiet, way past the time I'd rather go though. Not too early, but I have to get up early, and I value my sleep. Lights off, stretched out after saying out loud, "Thank you, Lord." I tried falling asleep, proving that night not so easy to do. My bed starts moving, then shaking in place. I have a queen-size bed, and I know I'm not dreaming. It starts shaking even more violently, and to my absolute horror, I am being engulfed inside of my mattress, sucked in and surrounded on all sides, but not swallowed or covered. Thank you, Lord. I couldn't cry out, make a single sound, yet I really tried. My family was in a nearby room. They couldn't hear my silent screams. Still trying to struggle, arms, legs, body completely unable to move, trapped yet cognitively awake, still immobile in my scary captive mattress. The trembling bed seemed to go on for quite a while, yet my clock said only maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I seriously did my best not to panic, to lose it, but when it was finally, mercifully over, I raced out of my room to tell my family, but they were fast asleep. Have any of your listeners experienced anything like this? I've been reading about this strange topic. Something about it's best to go to sleep at the same time every night, and that sleep paralysis happens when the mind and body are out of sync, at the point of falling asleep and waking up. I'm no longer in that apartment, so I can finally regulate my sleep. I never, ever wish to go through that paralyzing experience. I repeat, ever again. And in case you're wondering, I still thank God every night. When I was around 7 or 8, I woke up one night, or so I thought, and something just didn't feel right. Just an uneasy feeling washing over me, and a fearful feeling coming in waves. I got out of bed to look for my mum or dad because, well, at that age, when you're scared, that's what you do. As I walked through the house, the feelings intensified and seemed to be leading me to a certain room. As I came to the door of the family room, I saw something that, to this day, is burned into my mind. At the back of the room, hovering off of the floor, bound in what looked like black vines, were my mum, dad, and brother. They were all unconscious, and in between my parents and sibling was this floating presence. Long black hair down to her knees, partially covering her face, and she had her arms spread out to each side. My parents were connected to her on one side, my brother the other. She was wearing some sort of white sheet or dress. I'm not sure which, because the thing I couldn't look away from was the face. More so, the eye I could see. It was filled with so much malice and hatred. She was so pale and so terrifying, but her black eyes were endless. I stood in complete shock and fear at what I was seeing, not knowing what to do. But then, something screamed in my head, "Run!" And I did. I bolted back to my bed, and as I ran, I knew she was chasing me. I could feel it getting closer and closer, and I was crying so hard. I got to my room and threw myself in bed, yanking the covers up over my head. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that for some reason, whenever I went to sleep, I always sleep with one elbow bent behind me, not resting on me or anything, but my arm rested in such a way that the point of my elbow hung out behind my body. When I'd thrown the covers over myself, my elbow ended up in the same position. And as I felt the encroaching menace and darkness filling my room, I all of a sudden felt a massive bite on my right elbow and jolted awake. It was a dream, I thought, or was it? I, to this day, feel that bite when I recall that dream, which I still do vividly, and I'm now 35. You'd think that was it, but no. After my parents split up, we moved to a small country town and things were quiet for a while. I got a new stepmom and went through high school. Then, I got into my first serious relationship. I'd visit his house and was very much enjoying that part of my life. It wasn't all roses, but having him got me through so much. I'd get home late at night after visiting him though, and noticed something just felt wrong. My room came off of the hallway in our house, and near my door, I couldn't shake the unease. And the unease crept up to fear. It's like my instincts were screaming at me, "Something here isn't right. Run." But I mean, what could I do? So I just quickly walked past and go to the bathroom and get ready for bed. But as I came out of the bathroom at the end of the hallway and looked to my room, I swear I saw a woman standing there, in a big dress, watching me. Hatred, malice, unease, all radiated off her in waves, and I saw her face, and those damn eyes. I knew it was her. That one from my dream so many years ago. It felt so familiar, but so wrong. I ran to my room and shut the door, and just like when I was a kid, threw myself into bed and the blankets over my head. This happened every night I'd get home from my boyfriend's house, and every night I was just as scared. She felt so powerful, and then she went quiet again. I thought I was past seeing her. I moved in with my boyfriend and we bought a house. I got pregnant and had my first child in 2006, and life was good again. Then, one day, when my daughter was a child, she said something that chilled me to the bone. Me and her dad were in our room talking while we'd been doing jobs around the house. She was walking around with us and doing the kids' version of helping. It was really sweet. She'd gone quiet. Then, all of a sudden, walked into our bedroom and says, "Mummy, there's a lady in the kitchen." My blood ran cold. I tried to not show fear, as I didn't want to scare her. I said to her, "Oh, really? What does she want?" And her response was, "She wants to talk to Daddy." Me and him both looked at each other like, oh no. It didn't even click yet that it was the woman following me. We distracted my daughter, and both being believers in the paranormal, agreed to talk about it later. We didn't want to scare her. We never did get around to that discussion though. For the next few nights, she'd complain of seeing eyes. I asked her where, and she pointed to her doorway. "Lots of eyes. They're watching me, Mummy." I was at a loss of what to do. I think it was that night or the next couple as I walked into the kitchen that I felt that feeling. That damn feeling. So familiar yet so haunting, and I was scared. She was back, and she'd stand in the kitchen, a black shade in the corner. I could see her out of the corner of my eye, just hanging there, watching. I to this day don't feel right being in my kitchen for too long. Neither does my daughter. It's just a constant feeling of unease when you're in there, but it's livable. Some days it's heavier than others. Some days you don't even notice it. Over the next few years, me and their dad separated and I lost my mum. I lost many friendships as well. Also had something seriously affect my son. The heaviness was always there. My daughter honestly thinks she wants me for herself. She said she only seems to go quiet when you're on your own. We're isolated in the town we're in. Subjects like this are just not talked about. So I had to look into helping myself. I've done some things to try and remove her from my life, unsuccessfully. I think I'm stuck with her. She seems to be quiet now though. Who knows how long that'll last for? This is my second story, and to me, it's creepier than the first one I emailed you before this one. Sorry it's so long, but I want you to understand it fully. This house or entity did this over time, so here it goes. In 1992, the house with flies, maggots, and a death smell. Remember the first story when I was 12? This story gives me nightmares till this day. I was 15 when I had my son, 16 when I had my daughter, and in this story I was pregnant for the third time. Please don't judge me, I was young and stupid, I admit that. So anyway, my upbringing wasn't perfect. There was a lot of abuse. Sexual abuse, mental, physical. Well, my mum and stepdad had broken up because he had cheated on her. He, for a while, lived with these 2 women and 1 teenager around 14, so my age. Eventually, when I was 16, because my son was maybe 9 to 10 months old and I was pregnant, he and my mum moved back in together. And we moved into the same house my stepdad was living with other women. So day 1, literally first day, my son out of the blue screams bloody murder as soon as we are walking inside this house for the first time. I chalk it up to it being a new house. He's never been here before. Eventually he cried so much he fell asleep. I should have known right then something was wrong, but not like anything I'd felt before. No, this was different. Nothing like when I was 12. This was, I don't know, and it still scares me. The next day we start cleaning this new house to how we like it clean. I started finding these little capsules of something and told my mum. So she told me not to worry about them. Don't touch them. Well, I accidentally broke one. It smelled like death and had tiny bones in it. I cleaned it up so my mum wouldn't find out. Remember, she wasn't very nice, so I cleaned it and threw it out, thinking nothing about it. Well, I went to set up my room and find it odd that the lock's on the outside of the door. Again, I think nothing of it. I changed the locks to the inside of my room. Remember, this is day 2 now. My son has kind of calmed down. So as the weeks go by, I'm getting bigger. The activity is way worse than before, and I'm having horrible nightmares at night. The closet doorknob, where I had my son's crib against, started rattling one night. I figured it's my son playing with it, turning it, because he knows that's where his toys were. No biggie, right? An innocent baby wanting his toys. Well, this goes on for a while. So do the nightmares. Only the nightmares are getting worse. I'm having dreams of a child asking to play with my son, only he has black eyes. I mean, no white, all black. I always say no, then wake up. A few more weeks go by, but the closet door is now slightly opening. I think, did I forget to close it? I am pregnant and about to give birth again. I chalk it up to stress of being so young and about 2 children. When the closet started opening, I start feeling something get in bed with 16-year-old me, pregnant, and I'm completely terrified. Then all of a sudden, I feel his arms wrap around my belly, only it's squeezing me really hard. Whatever it was, something was trying to kill the baby. I'm terrified, scared, crying, praying, everything I can think of. I couldn't even breathe, even to scream. Eventually it stopped. I got up and the closet was open again. I grabbed my son and let him sleep with me that night. A couple of days go by, and now my son is waking up for no reason. He's always slept through the night. Meanwhile, the doorknob rattles. The closet door now opens every night, and the nightmares of that kid with those eyes. And now, his toys make noise. I took the batteries out on purpose, yet they still made noise. How? Just how? Tell me how. Because that still scares me, and I'm 42 now. Only this now starts to happen every night, and my son is waking up terrified. So I give birth to my second child. I'm 16 in September 1996. Mind you, I give birth in the very house. Something is in bed with me, squeezing my belly and waking my son up. I didn't have time to make it to the hospital. So I come home, and for a while nothing happens. The dreams are getting worse, making me not sleep. Again, I chalk it up to stress. I'm 16, I have 2 children now, and I'm poor. So I figured maybe I should see a doctor. So I do. All the while, pictures are moving on their own. My closet opens when it shouldn't. My mum and 3 sisters all experienced something in that house. Being touched, feeling like you're never alone even when you are. It pushed me down the attic stairs pregnant for the 3rd time. Plus, the smells of death and the flies from when I was 12. Now my daughter is here, so my son sleeps next to me, and the dreams are even worse. One night in my dream, I got upset that the kid with black eyes wouldn't take no for an answer. So I told him in my dream, "You can never play with my son. You're too old. He's a baby still." In my dream, that thing got angry, and I mean angry. I had 2 bedroom windows, one on the left and one on the right in an L shape. Well, that kid walked around to the other window, and when I saw it, it wasn't a child anymore. It was a full-grown man with those same black eyes. It told me in my dream it would take my son. I woke up terrified, only to see my son fully awake trying to crawl out the very window I saw the man from my dream. Now in my dreams, I no longer see a kid. I see a man, and my son is terrified to sleep, as am I. I tell my sisters this. So I leave for a few weeks. Absolutely not one thing happens. As soon as I get back to that house in Houston, Texas, all those feelings come back, and my babies are scared. Now my daughter is older, and it wakes her up too, not just my son. My children are terrified to sleep at night. So am I, because of the nightmares. Plus, I wake up to my son trying to crawl out the window. The closet door opens. The doorknob rattles. Just everything scary all at once. I'm now 17 and pregnant for the 3rd time. Still having their dreams. My children are terrified and I'm extremely stressed. One day I started hearing something scratching in the attic, so I go check it out. Terrible idea. As soon as I got to the top of the attic stairs, something felt like it either kicked me down or pushed me down. Needless to say, I didn't go back up there. A few days later, my sister Virginia and Sabrina come over. My sister Virginia had a drug problem back then, and she'd come to my mum's to come down. This would be the last time she'd ever set foot in that house, and my sister Sabrina as well. My sisters and I talked, and I let them know it seemed like the activity was amplified and different. So my sisters stay with me. We all sleep in the same room. Ironically, no activity in my bedroom. But the next day, my sister started saying something was talking to her, telling her to get out. We sit her down and tell her it's probably the drugs she's coming down off of. Makes sense, right? Well, the very next day, we all meet up in the tiny hallway. My sister is still going on about the voice, when my other sister says, "I shit you not. No, I heard it too." I wasn't believing it for some reason or another. Probably because I was already scared. As we stood and had a small argument in the hallway, all of a sudden, something said,
"Get out."
We 3 stood in silence, complete disbelief. No way something just spoke from the attic, right? But then, it said it again, only louder, and the voice, I'll never forget it. It sounded evil. My sisters left that day. I stayed with my 2 children. When I turned 17, I moved out. taking my 2 children with me, and never moved back in with my mum. My mum finally told us that the other 2 ladies were into practicing black magic, and my stepdad told us they held some weird rituals. I never told my mum I broke that 1 capsule with the tiny bones. I just know when I left at 17, I never experienced anything like it since. Nor do I ever care to. That house and the things that happened still scare me 20 years later. I feel like I should tell you about when this entity tried to pull my son under the bed. Now, if you've listened to the 2 stories before this, I was pregnant 2 times in that home. But this was before I gave birth to my daughter, when the closet door started opening and something was getting in bed with pregnant 16-year-old me. Back in 1996, Oscar de la Hoya was a rising boxer. Watching him box was cool, even though we watched it on a VHS tape some friend of my stepfather had recorded from pay-per-view. Well, that day there was my mum, stepdad, son, and I think I was 5 months pregnant with my daughter. My stepdad tells us that he has a copy of the fight from pay-per-view from the night before, and we're going to watch it. So I'm totally excited. Even though it's like chaos around the house, for some reason that tape brought me joy. Even if I was scared, I was going to watch that fight, and it was fixing to happen in 10 minutes. So I get my son his little carpet, toys, blanket, just his kiddie toys to entertain him. My mum and stepdad are sitting on the bed. I position myself at the foot of the bed on the floor with my son so I can watch him while I try and see the fight. Well, I'd say about halfway through the fight my son got really fussy. Now, he normally didn't make a fuss. He was a rather quiet child. So I grab him and settle him for a nap next to me on the floor at the foot of my mum's bed, watching the fight. I give some juice, and he does go to sleep for 10 minutes. He went from a dead sleep to alert, awake, and looking around. I'm looking at him like, is he okay? So I ask him and he says, yes, mummy. So I think nothing of it. But he's looking under the bed. I know there is no such thing as monsters under the bed. I'm a little too old for that, and I'd definitely never teach my toddler that. Well, he goes back to playing with his toys like nothing. The fight's still on, about halfway through it. My son rolls over on his belly, and I shit you not, when he does this, something pulled him 10 feet across the room, trying to drag him under my mum's bed. I panic instantly because, what the hell, something just pulled my son across the room. Now he's stuck under the bed. My mum doesn't see this happen, but I do, and now the non-believing stepfather does. He panics and tells my mum something just pulled my son under the bed, or tried to grab him. My mum instantly blames me. It's my fault. She tells me to let him go. My stepfather, ever so calmly, says she doesn't have him. I saw something drag him. Grab him now. So myself, stepfather, and mother tried to pull him out. But it feels like something is pulling, and pulling hard. I'm crying, terrified. My son is screaming bloody murder, asking for help. My stepfather is now panicking, and he's normally the calm one. Complete, total chaos. That's how I'd describe it. So, pictures fall off walls, cabinets open and close, lights turn on and off, closet door in my bedroom opens on its own when it shouldn't. Something is crawling in bed with me. My son can't sleep. I'm having horrible nightmares, and the smell of death comes from my closet. And now, something just tried to pull my son under my mum's bed, and I'm even more scared because now it's doing things during the day. But worse, it hurt my son. My mum starts praying in 2 languages, asking for help. She's deeply religious, and I see why now. All of a sudden, it just let him go, just like that, like nothing was ever there. My stepfather grabbed my son and runs outside with us in tow, because something literally just tried to pull my son under a bed. Hell no, not going back in there. When he notices the handprints around my son's ankles, I swear my stepfather shook for about an hour straight. He wouldn't let my son go either. That scared him, and I told him, I told you, this house isn't right. I shouldn't live here. That day I made a promise to myself. When I turned 17, I'd leave no matter what. Me getting pregnant a third time was a blessing, and I didn't realize it then. But I knew I couldn't stay in that house. For those that care to know, I ended up giving up my third child for adoption. Once I moved out of that house, 17 and pregnant, I went through a few days of residual energy. Then it stopped altogether. But when I'd go visit my mum at that house, that thing or entity or whatever it was made itself known. It sure didn't let me forget why I left and never went back. I did get my life together after this, so when people say they are curious about haunted homes, I'm not. I lived in one, and it terrified me, made me think I was going crazy, until it did hurt my son. That's when I knew I had to leave, and I couldn't legally leave until I was 17, as per state law. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to all the subscribers who took their time and effort to write out stories for me to read for this one. I still have a few more stories and some more on their way, so expect another subscriber story special in the next month or so. So if you personally have any stories, feel free to send them to me anytime. I'd like to make this a regular thing. If you'd like to help support this channel, there are links to both my Patreon and my Teespring account in the description below. Feel free to check them out. And a huge thank you to those who already do support me on Patreon. And as always, the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. And remember,
Papa loves you.